Does it show recording for you?
Yes.
Okay. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Consciousness Prince podcast. My name is Jonathan, and this is kind of almost a new season of the podcast, since it's almost literally a new season here in North America, and I'm back in school, and it feels like a kind of a fresh start. And so I'm here with another guest from California, Jakeb Brock. And do you want to pronounce the name of the town or city you're from again, Jakeb?
It's Ukiah, California.
Okay, Ukiah. And you said that's in the north part of California, right?
Yes.
So would that be kind of closer to Oregon, maybe? Or
it's about halfway between San Francisco and the Oregon border.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't really been out to that part of the continent yet, so someday it'd be fun.
Yes.
But yeah, so we're going to be talking. Well, this one really fits the name and theme of my podcast, Consciousness Prince, as Jakeb has written some books on the topic of consciousness, specifically his theories on the new consciousness, he calls it. And his most recent book is I'll share the screen here to show what it looks like on Amazon. It's called Blogs of the New Consciousness. Do you see that there on the screen? Yeah, so you just released it in April this year?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, do you want to
oh, sure.
Your story of how you came to write this book?
Sure, Jonathan. What it is on my website for the past 7 years, I've been writing blogs that are more like teachings. They're not just a kind of a rambling diary kind of entry. They're actual teachings on different subjects pertaining to everyday life, and the implications of these of the new consciousness on everyday life. And so in this book, I actually record the original blog and then write a commentary about it that is very up to date. And so it's a very comprehensive overview of what I believe.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We can get into exactly what that is.
Okay.
Yeah, or do you want to just start by kind of giving some background about yourself, how you started to be interested in this kind of thing?
Sure. My first encounter with spirituality was with Eastern thought back when I was in my early 20s, and yoga and meditation and Hindu philosophy. And I never embraced the Hindu religion, but I studied very, very much for a couple of years and really embraced that aspect of the whole perspective of looking at life through a spiritual lens rather than strictly materialistic and everything that we've been taught in growing up in school and so forth. And so that opened my heart and soul a lot to spirituality. And then a couple of years later, I discovered Jesus. I was reading the New Testament for the first time. I had no religious background, and I was really, really taken with Jesus and who he was and the things he said and the things he did and just everything about his person. And so I did end up becoming a Christian, and according to the church definition. And for about seven or 8 years, I pretty much dove into that. So my background spiritually began with the Eastern thought and I never totally rejected it, even when I became a Christian, which was sort of a no-no. But
Yeah.
I did sort of retain it and ended up blending these two philosophical viewpoints. In other words, I was after my church days, when I came out of the church and began to search on my own again spiritually, I retained both. I retained both the Eastern and the Western spirituality, and found many common aspects to them. So my background is Christian, though, in the sense of now I would call myself a Christian mystic. I'm not a fundamentalist Christian anymore, and I don't believe a lot of the doctrines that the church puts forth. But I do believe in the Bible for the specific reason that I'll share with you, which was really the beginning of my journey that I'm on now, which was that I came to understand that the unifying aspect of Eastern and Western thought is human consciousness. And so the Bible, I actually retained my love for the Bible because I began to look at it differently from the viewpoint of consciousness. And I began to, my eyes were opened in a whole new way to what the Bible was and why it was written and who Jesus was. And I understood that the Bible is actually a blueprint for the evolution of human consciousness. In other words, it begins with Adam, and it explains Adam's consciousness, his state of consciousness. First of all, it explains that Adam had this experience in the Garden of Eden where he was totally transformed. And what I began to see that as was an actual awakening to consciousness. In other words, Adam he had been created with consciousness in him, but it was asleep until that day in the Garden of Eden. And he awoke to it, and he became conscious, but he became conscious in a certain state of consciousness. And that state of consciousness I now call in my writings Adamic, because it reflects Adam. And basically, the Bible explains it very briefly, but very well, when it says that the two most defining aspects of Adamic consciousness are separation from God and dualistic thinking, like the thinking of good and evil. And in the Bible, it's described as the knowledge of good and evil. That's what Adam, the tree that he ate from, was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So it opened him up to this state of consciousness of dualistic thinking, and separation from God was part of that, because in the Bible's narrative, it defines how immediately Adam's impulse was to hide from God. So these are the two aspects, and there are many others, of Adamic consciousness that have defined this age, this entire age of human endeavor. And I'm a student of history, and so I can look back and I can see that for 6,000 years, mankind has been in this Adamic state of consciousness. And we've been basically doing the same thing for 6,000 years. We've been creating a dualistic alternative to good called evil. And by doing this, we have fought war after war. In other words, every war is fought because one side is saying we're the good guys and they're the evil guys. So this whole age has been defined by war, and of course violence and hatred and bigotry and people's opinions, good and evil, and also separation from God. And unfortunately, this has been misunderstood. People think that when we become religious, that ends, but it doesn't. Um, Unfortunately, separation from God is also in our religions. It's actually a way that our spiritual impulse of consciousness can be expressed through Adamic consciousness. That's what we call religion. And there is distance in our religion. There's distance between us and God. And that's why most religions paint a picture of God as being in heaven, far away, and man being on earth, uh, and us needing to work our way, to get close to God. So anyway, Jonathan, as I pursued this, I understood who Jesus was, that the Bible actually shows us the evolution of consciousness throughout this age in which we've been Adamic. And then the Bible ends with the birth of the Christ. And who Jesus was the example, our paradigm of Christ consciousness. And so I would probably clash with church doctrine in this, because I don't see Jesus as being God any more than you and I are God. He was just at a higher state of consciousness, an evolved state of consciousness that we are all heading toward in our evolutionary impulse, of which consciousness is evolutionary. That's a scientific aspect of it. And so we're all heading toward being like Jesus. And it's written in the Bible where Jesus is described as the firstborn of many brothers. He's not God in the sense that he's untouchable and above us and divine and we're hopelessly mortal. He is our brother, and he is out ahead of us, but we need to evolve in consciousness to where we are one with him and one with God. And that means leaving Adam behind, the Adamic consciousness behind. And that's what the Bible shows us that we need to do. But we haven't done it as a collective. Only a few individuals have done it. And so we're still very much in process of coming out of Adam. And we need to do that. And it's taking a very long time. And I believe that Jesus, he came 2,000 years ago, and he thought it might be possible to have it happen then on a collective basis at 2,000 years ago, but it didn't. Instead, they hung him on a cross and got rid of him to the best of their ability.
Wow, that's very profound and succinct way of, or obviously you have whole books about this, but of explaining this very kind of it could be or it should be revolutionary to people who are in fundamentalist kind of Christian churches.
Yes.
But yeah, it's exciting to me because it basically it helps me come to you articulated well kind of some things I've thought about but not been able to put into those words, so yeah, thanks for that, Jacob.
Absolutely.
I'm taking some psychology and philosophy courses now, and outside that I've been reading a lot of books by Carl Jung and other psychologists.
Yes.
That are kind of more religious or mythology focused or whatever. So So yeah, it really ties into what and yeah, I guess that's kind of how I landed on Consciousness Prince as my podcast. But anyways, I was gonna ask like, or what would you? Or I have a lot of questions from that,
Sure.
but what? How would you define how would you define God? I guess is my first question. Or what would be?
Very good question.
Yeah,
It's very important
yeah,
too, because our Adamic state of consciousness is rooted in separation from God. We're basically, we've been in error for 6,000 years about who God is. And we've been believing that God, first of all, is personal. Like we've had an anthropomorphic view of God. In other words, we've projected all of our human qualities onto God and put him up in heaven as a very great, superhuman personal being that undertakes all of this activity uh, on a mind-boggling scale of, like, in other words, you pray to God, I pray to God, 5 billion other people pray to God, and God is taking all of these requests and trying to fit, somehow fit them into his schedule of being able to either answer them or not. And it's just, it's a very error-prone idea, and it's rooted in Adamic consciousness, which is separation from God. So what I have come to believe is that God is actually consciousness. God is simply what we have trouble relating to is that God is consciousness fully evolved. God is the perfection of being. God has already, we're consciousness in evolutionary process. God is consciousness arrived. you know that's why I believe in the creation of what God has created, because I believe that consciousness is creative. It creates without even doing anything. It doesn't have to sit down and say, well, now I'm going to create a butterfly, or now I'm going to create a plant with purple flowers. What consciousness does is it simply creates as an aspect, a scientific aspect of what it is. So God, being so far out ahead of us in evolutionary terms, not separate from us, but simply fully evolved and perfect, created a universe that is absolutely infinite. We can't conceive of any end to our universe. And that's because God's consciousness is infinite. In the same way, man, the consciousness of man creates, and we have created a world. We've created the world of man. And you can see the difference, it's pretty stark. I mean, God created a beautiful universe with intricacies upon intricacies, and we've created a very dark world with smoke in the air and factories and raping the planet, and just as you can see, it's not a very pretty world that we created, but that's because of our Adamic consciousness. It's because of good and evil, and it's because our Adamic consciousness is consciousness at work, but it's not evolved. It's not enlightened yet. And so God is not a personal being. That's the first mistake that we made. God is an impersonal spirit. God, and Jesus said as much. God is spirit. So this puts God in a whole new light. In other words, we don't need to work our way to God. We don't need to appease God or try and influence God in any way. God is doing what God does. And so that's that's my view on who God is.
Hmm. Yeah. So and I guess the Bible said, or Genesis says, we were created in the image of God. So I guess
Yes,
we're
that's
right.
consciousness to consciousness.
Hmm. And
God
then
created us with that. That's, in fact, that's the other thing I wanted to say to you, is that I am a scientist in the sense that I believe in the evolution of consciousness, which evolution is a scientific process. In other words, evolution happens whether we want it to or not. It happens as part of the universal creation, as a scientific property. It's not up to us to make it happen. But what I differ in a lot of my views on science with the scientific community of our day and of the last couple of hundred years, which I think there have been great strides made, but I differ about consciousness and what it is. Most of our scientists believe that consciousness is an aspect of mind, and I don't believe that. I believe that consciousness, I believe that mankind has a psyche, an inner realm which is bigger than mind, and it actually houses four functions, our psyche. And this is how we were created. It houses two spiritual functions, which are our spiritual consciousness and soul. And at the same time, it houses two biological aspects, mind and body. So consciousness is separate than mind, but it's a part of our created makeup. In other words, we all have it. And in Adam, we all awoke to it. So in other words, we descendants of Adam, we awoke with Adam. We are genetically linked to him, and so we are awake to our state of consciousness, but we we are our consciousness is not mind. And this is a big problem, because if we see it as a part of mind, that means that it dies. That means that consciousness would die when our body and mind die. Mind and body are biological, and all biological functions decay, all matter decays and dies. And mind and body do also. So if we believe that consciousness is a part of mind, then we not only die, but we also limit consciousness greatly. And we also we end up elevating mind above consciousness in our psyche as an ascendant function. And this is a big mistake, because you can see that our culture, our world is very mind oriented, and mind is the problem. It's not the solution. Consciousness is the solution, but we've put consciousness down in a very low place in our scheme of things, our psychic scheme. And we need to elevate consciousness and identify with consciousness, because it's the fact that we identify with mind and body that has brought death, disease, war, everything.
So, or how would you, or so to, or for myself and others, how do you define mind and how it differs from consciousness, or explain that a bit more, like what,
Sure.
because it
Okay.
seems like it's a synonym for each other, but I guess or you're saying it's
That's because of our scientific community's teaching on it. But yeah, mind is not a it's basically a tool. it's a great tool in its right place. It's very capable tool, but it's biological. So it is limited. And if you look at animals, Jonathan, and mammals, they appear, a lot of people think that animals have consciousness. They don't have consciousness. Spiritual consciousness is the gift of man from God in our creative makeup. It's unique to man. Animals have mind. They have intelligence. They have feelings. They have bodies, which is an extension of mind. So the best way to understand mind is to see that it is a shared function of all creatures, of even insects have minds, birds, but unique to man is consciousness, and consciousness is separate in our psyche. It's a separate function. That's why we were created in the image of God. And that's what sets us apart from other creatures. Mind is limited, consciousness is infinite. So if we identify with mind, we end up dying. We end up going down, because that's where mind goes. It goes down to decay and to the grave. But if we identify with spiritual consciousness, we go forward. It's infinite, it's evolving, and it never dies.
So then what is, when an individual human being dies, what is that, what does it look like, or how would or are you saying that they wouldn't necessarily experience consciousness in the same way anymore because their mind and body is gone, but
they need a new mind and body if they want to go on?
So do you think, or is that what or what do you think, or is that, or how would you tie this into the Christian idea of resurrection of both Jesus, like in terms of after 3 days, and then I guess more generally, or I guess there's different beliefs but Revelations, I guess, talks about a time when people will be resurrected. Do you have explanation or how to tie that together, I guess?
I think the resurrection is something separate that we'll talk about more. But to answer your question about death and going on, that's called reincarnation. And it's not resurrection. It's the reincarnation. Basically, our consciousness is evolutionary. So our consciousness is unfolding toward the Christ. And we need time, obviously. One lifetime, basically, the things that cause us to evolve are our experiences in life and the processing of our experiences and growing and finding deductions from what our experiences mean. Those are the things that cause us to grow in consciousness, and consciousness evolution is incremental. In other words, it's not lost, it's retained. On some level, our consciousness knows what it has already learned. It doesn't need to learn those lessons again. But in order to move toward the Christ, we need many lifetimes of experience. And so that's reincarnation. Our bodies and minds die after 80 years on the average. They decay, which I'm experiencing. So, bodies and minds go the way of all the earth, dust to dust. But consciousness lives on. So what happens is, after death, consciousness takes a new body and mind and goes forward with that. That's not the resurrection. The resurrection is actually a spiritual breakthrough of reaching that point in Christ, of Christ consciousness. It may not be full Christ consciousness. In other words, not to the degree of Jesus, but experiencing enough of the Christ to where our consciousness, our individual consciousness, is raised from it's raised from the need to be on this earthly plane. And it's actually in other words, there's no more growth on earth in this earthly plane that we need. So we go forth in the resurrection, which retains us. It's sort of like a sleep where we are kept for the new age and preserved for the new age to come forth in the new age with Christ, with all Christ figures, with all Christ humanity, to participate in the new age. And so that's a little bit of what the Bible alludes to, but it doesn't say that exactly about the resurrection.
And so, so when we our consciousness, or is it? Would you say like each person has their own individual consciousness, or are you saying, or is there kind of, or is the Christ consciousness the kind of collective, or the full consciousness? Is that what you're saying there?
Yes, it's the full state of consciousness that we are heading toward, but we are all individual states of consciousness. And so a lot of our individual traits are actually going to be retained in the new age. They're not simply of mind and body, but yes, we're going forward with those. And the collective is a different matter altogether, because unfortunately in this age, the collective consciousness of man has been sort of diverted into a power-hungry sort of state where they don't want the evolution of consciousness to take place. They're resisting it very strongly. And they want this world to go on because their place in this world is one of profit and comfort, and they think they've got it made here.
Yeah. So then, you said, so Adam ate, or I mean, metaphorically or literally, or I mean, Eve gave him the apple, and then he gained knowledge of good and evil. And so, how do you define good and evil, and what would that, how living in a world, or how would you live your life in a way that you wouldn't have knowledge of good and evil, or is that what the goal is, kind of? Or
Yeah, good question. It's good and evil is it's basically what we're all caught up in. I mean, if you think of your own opinions about things, you're the way your mind works is it says, oh, that's good and that's bad. And every situation, every person is labeled, every aspect of life is labeled as good and evil. But if you look at Jesus, he's our example. He wasn't moving in good and evil. I know that people will disagree with me on that and say, well, look, he thought the Pharisees were evil men because they were doing this, and he thought the Romans were evil men. No, he didn't. Jesus's consciousness was beyond good and evil. It was singular. It was harmonious. It was all is good. Basically, that's why he could forgive, because it was like there is no flip side to good. God is good, consciousness is good, it's perfect. And that perfection is what we think of when we think of goodness. There's no flip side to that.
But then how would you characterize what you said about like people not having the right mindset or being focused on profit? It's actually similar to what Jesus uh, says about the money lenders, or he flips over the tables because they're exploiting people's money uh, for their own
Yes.
on religious or something on the religious grounds.
Good and evil is strictly a part of our state of consciousness, Jonathan. So he didn't condemn anybody. He said, I did not come to condemn, but to save. He didn't condemn people. He did what he needed to do in his lifetime to express his state of consciousness. But basically, there was no evil. It was just our state of consciousness. It's our state of consciousness has created evil. There is no evil except in man. There's no devil. There's no evil hierarchy of fallen angels. There's only man. And inside of man is this dualism of the state of consciousness of Adam. And unfortunately, man, because of our power of consciousness, has given evil as much power as good, because we get carried away with it. We get obsessed with it. And so we do evil things, and we create evil situations and evil groups and nations and whatever you want to call it.
Are you saying we just perceive the things as evil, or
no?
Are they
we create evil?
Oh, so there is evil, but it's only that
it's only in man.
Created.
Yes.
Okay.
If you take away man's state of consciousness, there is no evil.
Oh, I see. Okay. So yeah, basically the issue is that we see evil as something external, or something that's not part of ourselves, maybe, or like
right. We see evil as being a force in our universe that we can channel and be a part of, or commune with, and
or fight against, or fight against, and
yeah,
we're not.
Well, that's just the thing, is that those people that are caught up in the illusion of fighting against good and evil, who think they're good fighting evil, that's an illusion, because they're not good. For one thing, there's no good and there's no evil except in our state of consciousness. In other words, if you look at Jesus, there's only the truth. There's only the one reality, which we tend to associate with good. I mean, Jesus was good, and we look at him, but some people don't think he was good. So yeah, it's all man-made stuff in Adam, and we've inherited it and really played it to the hilt.
So, or what do you think, Adam, or do you see it as the apple as a metaphor, or what exactly went on, or what do you think created this Adamic consciousness in that, or like in the specific human being, or unless it's kind of more of a
very good question.
Yeah.
If you go back 6,000 years, and basically science has proven that the species of man, Homo sapien, is a lot older than 6,000 years. So that right away has brought it into conflict with the religious community, who thinks that the Bible says that that the creation took place 6,000 years ago. But science has proven that that's not true, that Homo sapiens are much older than that. So basically, what you had was human beings, Homo sapiens, before Adam, who were like animals in the sense that they had mind, they had body, they had great intelligence, and but they did have, even back then, they did have spiritual consciousness and soul as a part of their created makeup, but it was not awake. It was not awakened. So that's what happened in the Garden of Eden. Was man, it was an evolutionary outbreak or outworking where the evolution of consciousness was basically coming out and saying, okay, I'm awakening here, and you've got to respond to Adam. And so that's why, even though God warned Adam not to eat of that tree, Adam went ahead because it was the evolution of consciousness was stronger. And so he went ahead, and as soon as he ate of that fruit, something tremendous changed inside of him. It was like a complete transformation. And he awoke. He awoke to his endowment of consciousness, and he became a conscious being. But this gave rise to the state of consciousness that we're now in, because evolutionary consciousness doesn't awaken to the Christ. It awakens to Adam. That's the science of it. And so you could view it, Jonathan, like a seed. Okay. Evolution takes place all around us in nature. That's what a seed becoming a plant is. It's the evolution of that genetic form. In other words, a seed has the full genetic potential of the plant that it's going to become inside of its little house. In that seed is the full genetic code. Let's say it's an apple tree. Well, an apple seed is a tiny, ugly little pebbly thing, but it contains the full DNA, the full genetic code of a mature apple tree that is a life-giving tree full of fruit, beautiful blossoming tree. Our state of consciousness is like a seed state. It's a little ugly pebble. And yet it has the full genetic code of the Christ, of who we're going to become in it. And that's what we've been in process of all of this time, these 6,000 years, is the maturing, the planting of the seed to where it can become its full planting, its full tree, its full glorious tree. And so yes, we've all been in that process, and the state of Adamic consciousness has been ugly in many ways, but it is undeniably full of this genetic code of the Christ. And that's why many of our individuals throughout the last 6,000 years have become much better, a much better version of Adam than others, much more evolved, much more compassionate, much more, viewing life as Jesus did. They may not be in the full place in their one lifetime that we knew him as Jesus was, but they got much closer than most people. And the reason for that is because we're all evolving states of consciousness. We're all moving forward. We all have the same genetic code of who we will one day become. And others are have turned out to be not very nice versions of Adamic consciousness.
Mm. I want to ask, how does human reproduction play into all this? Or you could say, or I mean, or I wonder if you've considered the term, or I've just thought of the term evic consciousness. I don't know if that's a valid term, but like, and I'm not, by saying that, and after that, I'm not implying that women are only created to be a source of reproduction. But I guess we've been talking about Adam and, or I mean, we've been talking about humanity as it, or in the way that we're, without adding that aspect into it, I guess. And or do you want to talk about your
Yeah,
thoughts on that?
yeah. Jesus said something very, very important, and it's overlooked by most, even most Christians. He said that in the age to come, there will be no marriage. In other words, there'll be no reproduction.
Mm.
And basically, what that means is that reproduction is a part of our Adamic consciousness experience during this age. And the reason for it is, and this opens up a whole nother area, it's our karma. Our karma is at work in every one of us, moving us along on our evolutionary journey. And we all have karma, and we all are in different levels of evolutionary unfoldment. But our karma is there to move us forward, and it's there to bring us the experiences that we need to grow. And then it also is part of the process of reproduction, because of reincarnation, that we need time, we need more lifetimes. And that's where reproduction comes in, is that we need bodies. In other words, when you die and you're not done, you're not fully evolved yet, your karma is still saying, you've got more work to do, I need to bring you more experiences, you need a new body. And during this age, we've had reproduction for the purpose of creating bodies for karma's work.
Mm-hmm. So do you basically think, or like, our consciousness continues in new generations, or our own, or maybe our own children, or do like our do we
Our
really?
children don't have anything to do with us.
Hmm.
Our children are karma induced. They're karma. In other words, I find a woman, I mate, I get married, I mate, I have children, but those children are not mine. And there's a very famous quote by the poet Khalil Gibran that said that children come through you, but not from you. And this is because there's a karmic being waiting for a body. So as soon as my wife and I have a child, that karmic being says, I need that body. And they attach themselves to it. So our children are really are not, we tend to think that they're us, and just an extension of us. But they're their own being, and they're their own karmic being on their own evolutionary path of consciousness. And so they pick a body, and we need to reproduce in this age in order to provide bodies. And so we've created this whole mythos about reproduction and women and men and romance, and it's all just a ridiculous kind of game, but we take it very seriously. And
So you're saying it, well, it has a function though, I guess,
It has a function. We need bodies right now.
or the kind of the principle or institution of marriage you think has a function there, and that's why it's so part of Christianity, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, marriage it's just been found to be the best, safest um, way to have offspring.
Right.
That's just I think that's just a human finding.
Yeah, it's been passed along for many
Mm-mm.
generations, and
And it's true. It's true. I mean, if you look around, people who've had children outside of marriage struggle really badly.
then why do you think, or I mean, in today's world, at least here in North America, it seems that well, it's been challenged a lot, and or I'm actually reading a book about the sexual revolution of the 1960s, or it's a case against it, but like, how, where do you think, or why has that happened, or why are so many people of the mindset that, well, uh, or at least people don't admit, or when they're people my age, I'm 28 or younger, kind of, they're they don't trust a lot of wisdom that's of older people maybe, but or they rebel against the idea that you need to be married to have that kind of relationship. But why do you think that is? I don't know.
Well, I think that it's cultural mostly. And we take our culture very seriously. First of all, everybody's identifying with their mind and their personality and their body. And then as they identify and they build an ego, and life becomes a total distraction. They don't know what they're doing. They're Jesus said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." They're just living in this dream of cultural, uh, I don't know what you would call it, but it has really nothing to do with reality. And but people take it very seriously, get very caught up in it, and it's a huge distraction from consciousness evolution, which they don't even know is going on, and they don't even know that that's what life is about. And they just get caught up in romance, and they get caught up in rebelling against the normal procedures of romance. And it's all just a cultural dance that we do.
Hmm. And something probably created, yeah, just by, uh, or would you say it has to do with that good and evil kind of thing, or
It has to do with our dualistic nature, of course.
hmm.
Of course, I mean, everything we do is expressing that. And in fact, it's in every thought, basically, of mankind right now.
So then how do you, or I mean, you're still a human being. You said you're older, but but you have a lot of insight on all this and wisdom from your life experience. So, what's your advice, I guess, to people to, if it's possible to get away from that kind of dualistic mindset, or what's your advice for someone 28 years old, about how to approach, I guess, daily life, I guess.
Well, it's difficult um, to really give advice because it's like praying. It's like if I pray for you and if I'm concerned about you, for instance, and I pray for you and I say, God, take care of Jonathan, make this right in his life, and so forth. Unfortunately, that's not a prayer that's going to be answered because your karma is what decides who you are, what you are, and how far along on your evolutionary journey that you are. Remember that your evolutionary process is retained incrementally throughout each lifetime. My praying for you is actually going to not only not do anything, but it's actually going against your karma. In other words, if I say, God, make it easier for Jonathan, don't, it's too hard right now, help him. No, you need exactly what your karma is bringing you. And so it's like that because, I lost my train of thought, but we are, we're all governed by karma. And so there's not too much that I can do for you, and there's not too much that I can do in the way of advice. That's where we were, in the way of advice, because again, you are where you are. And if I give you advice, of course I would say to everybody, and I do care about where people are at, and I would say to everybody, become as spiritual as you can. Change your values, leave your materialistic values behind, your cultural values, and begin to seek a spiritual path. And I would say that to everybody, but if their karma is not in cahoots with that, it'll fall on deaf ears. But for all of those who are on some level beginning to really sort of move toward closer to the goal, I would say go for it. Go more and more, go deeper and deeper. Do whatever it takes to express that part of yourself. Jesus said that it's the truth that sets you free. So I would try, and I do try in my books and everything, to tell the truth, because I'm not an evangelist. I'm not trying to convert anybody to anything, but I would tell the truth, because that's, first of all, that would clear away the cultural haze that we're all under and get you moving further along the road. And it's just part of what Jesus was, an evolved being who came to serve us. And it's part of the dance that we do, is all evolved beings, as they evolve closer to the goal of the Christ, turn and serve. They don't live for themselves any longer. So I do feel a compassion for people, and I do feel very much that I would like to help people. But again, I can't go against their karma. I can only tell the truth, and if they respond, that's up to their karma.
Because we're so trained to, or I mean, maybe it's culture that tells us to not, or trains us to not tell the truth, or to communicate in ways that fits in the norms to get you liked or proved in some way, and usually telling the truth.
It's all part of that illusion of distraction that we've built.
Yeah, it's, or in, I guess being spiritual, it kind of has this stigma too, or like, or it's seen as, I mean, probably among younger people, it's just seen as uncool maybe to some people, but which is, or to care about, to not care about material things uh, like obtaining wealth and status symbols like clothes and cars and jewelry, stuff like that. But hmm, so when you say be spiritual, what does that mean? Just focus on, or is that the
Well,
same, yeah, same as
the
telling
truth is that what we're all here for is consciousness evolution. So
Mm,
right away, that sort of uh, clears the playing field of a lot of people who don't even know that, or if they would hear it, they wouldn't agree with it. They would believe that we're here for a totally different reason, and so forth. But that's the truth. And that's a huge step of consciousness evolution if you realize that our spiritual aspect is the most important thing going on here. It's there's little that can compare to it, and most of it is just illusion. So that would be the first step, is just clearing away all the stuff, all the fluff, and getting down to the business of realizing that spiritual growth or evolution of consciousness is the only important thing. It's the only thing really going on, and everything else is just distraction. And it's it it you can live your whole life in distraction, and many people do.
mm.
And then you die, and what happens? You come back. You come back for more. You come back in hopes to get more serious.
But does that mean, or does that not mean that we should, or we should still take care of our bodies and our minds and try and uh, uh, do our best to make them as healthy and
Sure.
successful, I guess, or
If
as
you had
like
a servant, if you had a servant who was a servant that you loved, who helped you in many ways, you would want to feed them and take care of them and give them a nice place to live and make sure they were happy in every way. So that should be our attitude toward mind and body. Mind and body are our servants, they're our tools, they're our help mates in this life.
Hmm.
They do a lot for us. So of course we would take care of them, and of course we would uh, we would want to be healthy, we would want to exercise and do everything you need to do for your body to make it functional and helpful. And same with your mind. You don't want your mind to you don't want it to be, well, first of all, you have to realize that your mind has been trained to be your master, and so you have to put it in its right place, and then you have to take care of it. You have to you know make sure that it doesn't get carried away with emotion, uh, obsessing about this and that.
And so is mind work, or like uh, mind becoming master? Is that where good and evil comes from, or
Yeah,
okay?
our we've made a huge mistake about mind, and we've made a huge mistake about the makeup of our psyche. In other words, if consciousness exists, it's a part of mind. That means that mind is bigger than anything, and that's a mistake. And so we have to put mind in its place as a biological function, not as the ascendant function of our psyche. Spiritual consciousness and soul are the ascendant functions because they're forever. Mind and body are just biological and they die. But we have to go in there and we have to do some rearranging because, well, that's our whole birth into this lifetime has been culturally indoctrinated from the day we were born with a reality view that mind is ascendant, that mind is the master. And so that's a very strong uh, um, thing that our mind has been impressed with, that it has all the culture's backing to view it as the master. In other words, if you go in there and you say to mind, you're dethroned from this day forward, you can't be the master anymore, mind will put up a huge stink, because it'll say, listen, the culture told me I belong here. And reality, our reality view is that I belong here, and you're the wayward one. And you know, go mind your own business. And
Mind your, yeah.
yeah,
Wow, that's mind blowing.
we need to be mind blowing. Blow it up.
uh, and then, or do you want to? Or I haven't studied enough Eastern religion to really, or that's where the concept of karma really comes from. Do you want to explain that a bit more? Or,
Sure. I do differ with a lot of people's idea of what karma is. A lot of people, even people from the East, believe that karma is the source of your actions in this life according to good and evil. In other words, if you've done evil in your past, your karma will be bad, and you'll have negative karma causing you to do this and that in this life. And I don't believe that. I believe that karma is simply our guide for for spiritual evolution, and that karma is what brings us in every lifetime. It brings us what we need to evolve, and we can reject what karma brings us. You know, we can fight it. We can, and we do. We can say, you know, I don't agree with that. I don't feel like I should have any suffering or any kind of, you know, growth stretching, you know, things that cause me pain or anything like that. And we can fight it. But karma is still going to be karma, and it's still going to do its thing from life to life. And whatever we resist in this life, we'll have to do it at some other point.
mm, would you say, or can you define karma as a god or a relaxing
No,
thought? Or
it's absolutely,
I wanted to make a joke. This is a song by Taylor Swift where it's called Karma, and she defines karma as a lot of different, or uses it as a simile. But yeah. Anyways, that just came to mind.
yeah, it's no, it's not. For one thing, karma is not going to overrule anything, your free choice or your free will. It's just there to guide and suggest. And it's up to us to say, basically, I agree, and I'm going to go in harmony with what my karma is doing in this life and wants me to do. And it's not a god, and it's not overcoming my will. It's just there to guide and suggest.
Yeah, because are the kind of the cultural or the mainstream way of viewing karma, as you said at the beginning, is kind of like it's repercussions of past negative behavior. Basically, that's usually the only way it's really used. That like that
Right,
you're punished for something that you did
right,
in the past or something.
right.
But all right, but actually, all right, thinking about it, this Karma song by Taylor Swift, or she uses a lot of different descriptions, and maybe that is actually what you're saying, that it's just different things at different times, suggesting you to do different things, I guess. So maybe
Mhm,
she's wise in some ways,
mhm.
um, but yeah. So, or why do you think there's such a divide between well, religions in general, but then or specifically geographically east and west, like, well, I guess it's like Asia kind of in between, and then North America, Europe kind of, and Africa's
Right.
split.
To understand religion, we have to understand that it's an outflow of Adamic consciousness, of dualistic thinking. All religion has some truth to it, but all religion is expressive dominantly of Adamic consciousness, good and evil, the struggle that people feel within themselves and with what they want to see outside of themselves. And that's religion. That, unfortunately, religion has been a very divisive force in the past 6,000 years among men, because it's not of Christ. Jesus was not religious. It's not Christ consciousness. No matter how godly you think you're being in your religious expression and devotion, it's not Christ consciousness. And Christ consciousness will leave religion behind. In the New Age, there will be no religion. And the reason for that is because we won't need to express ourselves according to, in other words, we have this spiritual impulse, and it's brought on by our consciousness evolution. A lot of people they respond to that evolutionary instinct in them, but they are still caught in Adamic consciousness. So the first response is to go into a religion and to say, I want to give more expression to my spiritual side. And they don't realize that they're still very much caught up in Adamic consciousness. So they bring all that into their religion and they try and be spiritual. And I don't think it works very well, but of course it's part of the process. And
Yeah, people often say I'm spiritual but not religious, but more people should probably say I'm religious but not spiritual, maybe.
well, because they're denying that consciousness evolution is the only important thing. They're saying, like, when you go into the Christian church, the only important thing is to, first of all, become very moral, very upright, and then to live a Christian life of the highest quality, and to inculcate that life and impress it upon others, to try and save others, and that's their goal. They don't realize that the goal for all of us is consciousness evolution, and that they went into religion just to give expression to that, because that was the starting point. And that's what happened to me. When I went into the Christian church, I went in as an expression of consciousness evolution, although I didn't know that's what it was. But it was the response, the outworking to my own spiritual growth instincts. It took me into the church, and I got, totally swept away with the other things that were going on there, which everybody else was doing, about, you do this and you do that, and you change your life according to this and that, and you serve the church in this way and that. And I got totally caught up in that. But after a while, I came back to myself and I realized that isn't why I'm here. I didn't come here to become a church clone.
Right.
I came here to give expression to my spiritual instincts. And you guys are thwarting that now. So I had to leave and move on.
It's always about saving other people and serving other people, but
that's their goal. They've
but
just
really that should be because it's about saving and serving your, or as we talked about, your own mind and body, but that, or not in a selfish way, not that you shouldn't help other people in need, or take care of other people, or relate or be friendly with people. It's just that it's too ambitious, or an unrealistic to think that you can save or fully serve another conscious being of any sort, I think.
Right. You can overcome their karma.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's I think where the issue is, I guess. But I guess it's just, or as you said, I guess it's maybe it's a necessary, maybe being part of some church, or being a church clone, or being part of a community where everyone follows the same kind of actions or beliefs is maybe a necessary part for
Well,
most
I
people.
went into the church because I read the New Testament and I met Jesus in those pages. And that was a huge opening for me in my spiritual consciousness evolution. So to give expression to that, to give full expression to that, which I was really wanting to do, I went into the church thinking that I'm just going to go all the way with this, and I'm going to give my all to it. And it ended up that after a while, I was actually butting heads against what they want, what their view was of the goal, you know. And but I came out of the church, and I came out with Jesus greater than ever in my consciousness.
Yeah, or I've had similar experience, and like it seems like, yeah, there's certain things that are kind of worshipped or valued more, like community, or like, which basically means like you have to conform to some certain way of living or
Mhm.
attending stuff. But
Yeah.
um but yeah, mm, yeah. Oh yeah, I was gonna ask, have you heard of, or that there's a few people that I thought of when you've talked about this that have stuff in common. Rob Bell, he's also from California. He's a former mega church pastor, actually, but he's basically, it seems like similar journeys. He's more focused on, or he wrote a book called Everything is Spiritual. I just read, and then Richard Rohr is another one that I thought of that has similar kind of mindset. But have you heard of either of those?
No, I'm sort of out of the loop though.
Oh, okay.
I don't read too many opinions and too many
Okay.
things like that.
All right. Or those were both people I read books of like a few years ago. They seem, both their mindsets seem are really, so like they're both really focused on consciousness, and
Mm-hmm.
more than more than any other kind of
Right.
Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
The evolution of consciousness is much bigger than the church has given it credit for. The church just wants to box it into this little impulse that you have to be good, to be a good person, and it's much bigger than that.
hmm. So how do you or what do you do now, kind of, or what's your kind of daily routine, or how do you keep up your, or how do you approach your journey to consciousness evolution, I guess, on a daily kind of practical basis, I guess?
Okay, good question. I live my whole life for this now, because part of the evolution is that you, as Jesus said, you pick up your cross and follow him. And basically what that is saying is that you die to your human self ego, and you give yourself over to the resurrection. You can't have the resurrection without the cross. You have to die first. And so I have experienced that death where I basically, I still have the activity. A lot of it is subconscious that comes out in my life, where I'm still relating to life as I used to, where, it's me, it's myself, I'm identifying with my thoughts and so forth. But basically, I know that I have experienced going the way of the cross, picking up my cross and following him and dying. And what that means now is that I live for God, and not in a religious sense. I live for the new life, for the new consciousness. And so basically my daily routine is one of becoming conscious. In other words, if I start the day and I'm feeling, emotions are very strong, so let's say I'm feeling afraid of something that's happening in my life. My first task of that day is to sit down, get quiet, and bring up the reality of consciousness evolution. Focus on it, focus on my experiences that karma has brought me in this life, focus on who I now am, that I'm not identified any longer with my biological mind and the consciousness of Adam, but I'm moving forward, and I am therefore I recollect that every day, and I try and sort of overcome my feelings if they are moving me in a different direction. I meditate, and I do that primarily because meditation is my way of becoming very receptive to um, consciousness. And you could say it's becoming receptive to God, because divine consciousness and human consciousness are the same. They're just at different levels of unfoldment. So I meditate in order to get in touch with consciousness and quiet my mind and bring about that right order within me again. And I do that on a daily basis. And even when I'm working or doing something for money, or I mean, I'm a human being. I have to maintain my body and my life and my human life. And so even when I'm doing those things, I try and be conscious of the truth of what has happened to me.
Mm. Yeah, so um, it's not about specific kind of rituals as a lot of religions are promote, but more the mindset of, even it doesn't matter what stage, what place, what age, what vocation or job you're
No,
doing, you can apply this mindset, or basically it's just about taking time to be, or being conscious of the fact of what you're doing,
mhm,
and your goals, I guess, or your striving forward. Um,
exactly. A very great um, metaphysicist named Joel Goldsmith, he called it practicing the presence. And basically that's what I do every day, is I just practice presence. I practice being here now, because our mind wants to get very carried away with tomorrow and with what happened yesterday. And so I know it's become a bit of a cliche to say, be here now. Just say, I am here now, because that's where life is. And John Lennon said, life is what's happening when you're busy making other plans. Be here now. Life is here. Life is right in front of you, all around you, and within you. And so, yeah, practicing the presence is a very good way of thinking of it.
yeah, and Jesus says to, like, do not worry about tomorrow, because
Yes,
it has enough worries
exactly.
of its own, and do not worry about what you'll or eat or drink or wear, like, because the lilies of the field, don't worry about those things, and they're living.
Exactly. Exactly. I've learned so much by watching birds. I
Oh
love
yeah,
birds
yeah.
because birds sing all day.
Hmm.
They sing about nothing. You know, they don't have a song that they wrote and they say, well, I'm going to sing about this subject. They just sing all day long. And if you were to ask a bird, you know, just say, hey, bird, have you heard that the world has just ended and you know there's been a nuclear bomb set off? And the bird would just say, I it's always today, you know, nothing's any different right now. And
Right.
it'll always be today, even if I perish, you know, it's always now.
Mhm.
And so I've learned a lot by watching birds because they're not only joyful, but they're always in the present moment.
Yeah, they don't check the news. They don't.
Uh-uh.
They don't get. They're not up to date at all. Yeah, and
No,
they well, like the weather changes, but that
exactly.
they just accept that that's what's
Exactly.
happening. And but one other thing I want, or you've talked about the new age a few times.
Yes.
What exactly do you mean by that? And is that more of a something? Is that actually something that we can achieve, or is it
No,
what we're
no.
always going towards?
It's all we can achieve is to evolve in consciousness and become ready as best of to our ability. The new age is not going to, it's not going to come uh, to like an individual that says, you know, I'm now living in the new age. The new age is actually a collective experience for mankind. And it's going to be the age of the Christ. And this is my own opinion. And of course, nobody knows for sure what it's going to be like and if there'll be one. But my own thoughts on this are that the new age will be the age of the Christ. And it, like I said, it will be the age of the resurrection because all of those who in this age have been karmically prepared and move forth in their evolution of consciousness will qualify for the new age, but they'll be preserved through the power of the resurrection. In other words, what happens to us as we reach a certain point of spiritual evolution of consciousness is that we end our karmic association. We no longer need a karmic guide. We're finished. And we're basically just waiting for the new age. And if death comes, death of the body and of the mind, we are preserved in the resurrection to come forth in the new age. So you have a multitude of people who have lived during this age, who have achieved this, and who are being preserved right now in the resurrection. They're being kept and saved. It's like clicking the save button on your computer. You know, they've had their karmic experience, they've clicked save, and they're waiting. And
You don't mean like people who have like frozen their bodies.
no, 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 no. No, remember, consciousness evolution is
Right.
incrementally retained. So your consciousness knows its position, it knows what it's ready for, and yeah, it just has everything to do with your consciousness, not your body.
And do you think human-made technology is part of this at all, or
It could
is
be.
that actually a distraction from, or do you think it is part of it?
I think so. A lot of people would disagree, but I think that computer technology is very amazing, and I think that it's basically a new age technology. It's just come a little early, and I think when in the new age, it will be very much a part of life.
Yeah, and well, I don't know if you've experimented with any of the artificial intelligence, large language models, or I've done a lot, or I mean, uh, experimented with it a lot, and some of my courses are very, or one of them is like cognitive science that talks a lot about these large language models and stuff, and how, or and exploring the ethics of like, or I mean, if it ever becomes not just language, but able to create hardware or physical things on its own, I guess. So and I guess maybe that could just be the next stage of evolution of humanity, maybe. But yeah.
It's hard to say. I personally don't think we need to worry about uh, being having our technology overcome us and sort of uh, become an enemy to us. I think that we'll get control of it and we'll be able to use it. And when I say in the new age that we'll have computer technology, I don't mean the internet as it is now. I mean something entirely different. Something serving the purposes of the Christ and an expression of the Christ. And remember that that is not good and evil. That is not cultural, and it's not. All of that is of Adamic man.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
it will be very different.
yeah, maybe it's hard for us to actually understand, or
Yeah.
because we're of that mindset of, or we or literally we have the mind, and maybe that's why we can't be there
Yeah,
yet.
we have the good and evil mind, and we've created the evil, and it's same with AI. We're creating a great evil out of it because of our fears.
Mm.
Mm.
So, but it's not that I mean, obviously, like we don't want to destroy our minds. We don't want to try and get rid of, or we can't really do anything about our inclination to have this binary mindset, or we can do some things, but so how do we be like birds and just accept what is, or what?
But remember that your karma is leading you, for
Right,
one
right,
thing,
okay.
and you can relax in that sense, but at the same time, to not resist, to not, in other words, there's just as Jesus is an example of the new consciousness, of the new age, of Christ consciousness, there also is a very big example of what we don't want. And that's what we see pretty much in power in our world right now. We don't want greed. We don't want power. We don't want hate. We don't want bigotry. All of those things are tools of evil. They're it's a very good example to steer away from that. And so yeah, we can, we make choices every day. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with making money. Everybody needs to live, and everybody needs, I believe that everybody needs to have a roof over their heads and needs to have minimal dignity as a human being, and all of that should be something that we accept and provide. But greed is different. Greed is power. Greed is it's caught up in wealth for wealth's sake. And that is something that we don't want. And it's something that has created great suffering in our world. In other words, the greedy, powerful few, for their own sake, have oppressed multitudes of people, billions of people throughout this age. And that is very bad. That's something we don't want to ever aspire to. We want to steer clear of that. And if you ever feel yourself sort of doubting if you're getting, in a place that that is not pure like that, then you have to make the choice to say, to sometimes to choose nothing over what they dangle in front of you,
Hmm.
to choose humility.
And so that means not to do anything to try and fight that kind of that kind of mindset of greed and power in other people, right?
In
Or
other people, no. Don't fight it in other people, fight it in yourself.
yeah, because I mentioned to you, or we had to cancel our last recording because I won't get into exactly what happened, but I did try and fight what I thought was kind of oppression in some ways, and it didn't turn out well for me. But it
No,
wasn't a happy
we
birthday.
can't change anybody. We can't change any other person. We can change ourselves, and we can make our own choices, and that's our power.
Mhm.
And everybody has it, and everybody can do it, and nobody can stop you from doing it. But we can't really affect other people in their, because we don't go home with them. We don't know what's going on inside of them, and they, I mean, look at today's world. It's so volatile, with people getting very obsessed with a certain notion. This person wronged me, and therefore I'm going to kill them. That's just, we don't know what's going on inside of people and what they'll do. Like, you could have a confrontation with someone one moment, and then they go home and they say, I hate that guy, I really, so forth.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, there's been lots of, or I mean, there's been some significant deaths in the world recently, and I
Yeah,
mean, it
very
just
volatile right now.
and yeah, it's never the answer to even, or I've learned my lessons the hard, or I mean, not to that extent, but that any form of trying to fight something that you don't agree with usually just causes more harm to yourself and of course the other person if you're using violence. So
Yeah,
um, yeah, it's
steer away from that. But we can all change ourselves. And in fact, I remember somebody saying that if you want to change the world, change yourself.
right.
That's the best way to do it.
Yeah, all right. Always be focusing on not competing with other people, but bettering yourself. That's kind of the evolution, and make sure your own internal state of being is good before you try and do anything to um, do anything outside of that, I guess. But
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, I don't know. This has been a really great conversation. There's so much to
There
reflect
is.
on.
Yeah,
Do you want to, or so this Blogs of the New Consciousness is on Amazon for people to buy. And you said you told me beforehand you're working on updating some of your past writing too.
yes. I wrote, all of this began for me when I wrote a book called The New Consciousness: What Our World Needs Most. And that book was basically, of the premise of that book was that we're in the midst right now of experiencing an evolution, a collective evolution of consciousness, and that it will happen on a collective basis fairly soon. Right now, throughout this entire age, it's been strictly individual, but we're on the verge of a collective breakthrough in consciousness. And that's what will usher in the new age. And so this book, What Our World Needs Most, is the new consciousness. Well, that I have since understood that we can only change ourselves and work on ourselves. And we do need the evolution of consciousness most, but we can't make it happen, and on a collective basis. But it is, the premise of the book is right. It is what we need most. It will answer all the problems of our present world. There'll be no more poverty. There'll be no more war. So that new age reality is what we need most. But as far as going beyond that premise, in other words, in the book, I describe how we begin the journey, and we move along the evolution of consciousness toward Christ consciousness, and that Jesus was actually a great part of that collective evolutionary process for us. He came 2,000 years ago thinking that maybe we were ready as a collective back then, but he planted the seeds. Even though we weren't ready, he planted the seeds for what we're experiencing now. So the basic premise of the book is about that, and it's a good premise. But as far as the book itself, I'm now working on a revised version to bring it more up to date with the things that I've come to understand since then.
Okay, well, yeah, I'll keep an eye, or I'll stay in touch and look up, or it'll be on Amazon too, probably.
Yeah, it should be ready probably by the end of the year.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, and I can I'll post links to that too with this video, and yeah. Well, I don't know. Is there anything else you want to share with anyone listening before wrap it up?
I don't think so. I think basically we've said pretty much everything about getting, your priorities straight, and especially turning away from materialism, and because that's the illusion right now. That's the dominant illusion that we're all caught up in, and that has many facets. Our materialistic bent has given rise to mind ascendancy, because mind is matter, and it's biological. And so, yeah, we just need to hear the truth and take the truth into consciousness, and that is what will spur us forward more than anything. No religious practice, just hearing the truth.
Well, thanks for sharing all the truth that you're
very welcome,
have, and the wisdom, and taking the time to join me on here. So yeah, it's great meeting you and talking to you, and
you too.
Maybe we'll connect in some way, either, well, hopefully sometime in this life, but also as our consciousness evolves too. But
that's right.
Yeah. Okay, well, anyways, have a good rest of the evening there, Jakeb, and thanks again.
You too, Jonathan.
Okay, bye.
Bye.